The town of Sawmill had come together in a matter of weeks. Geo-scouts sent scans of planet Wildwood showing minerals of interest, and the Guild of Hammers had quickly decided that Wildwood looked very much like a nail. Machines had bulldozed and steamrolled a clearing in the jungle. Hab units had been deployed and populated, machinery dropped and assembled, and Sawmill was born. 3 weeks in, miners were already digging. The jungle seemed to disapprove. It regularly sent out fast-growing earthy roots into the clearing, kept in check by a fleet of patrolling sawbots. Occasionally something would bolt from the undergrowth. They were dog-sized, flat-shelled, crab-legged and mantis-clawed, taking crazed swipes at anything moving nearby. They rarely did any serious damage before saws or guards took them down. Mina Salvi, Sawmill's guard chief, inspected a battered helmet as she turned it in her hands. Kayla, its owner, had gone missing from her squad that morning. Her helmet seemed to have been deliberately placed at the edge of the clearing, with chunks of sawn-off root arranged around it. A single word had been carved into the largest piece. Leave. Hello and welcome to the Bad Spot, where I, Matt Risby, and I alone am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. And yes, this is the very last episode of my Starforged run. 60 episodes, or 62 if you count the Session Zeros, over nearly 3 years is just wild to me. I did not plan or expect this to run this long, or for so many of you to come along for the ride, but here we are together at the end of all things. I'm going to say up front that I really hope you enjoy this finale, and I'd love for you to leave a comment about it, but please refrain from posting spoilers so everyone can enjoy this last episode without knowing how it all goes down. Thank you for your cooperation. This week's Tale from the Drift was from Mark Pankhurst, and if that name is familiar, it is because Mark was the very first person to be featured on Tales from the Drift all the way back in 2021. And I thought it would have a nice symmetry to it if the person who got us going with these community submissions was the very same person who brought it all to a close. And I just want to thank Mark for writing this piece and for sending it in, and to also take a moment to stop and celebrate all of the amazing members of my community who have submitted bits of flash fiction for me to read at the start of my episodes. I didn't really think it would take off the way it did. I figured that maybe I might get a few submissions, but I thought that I would still be writing the bulk of these. But in actual fact, once they started coming in, they never really stopped. And by my count, I have featured work by 44 different writers over the past 3 seasons, some of whom have been featured 2 or 3 times. And I have at least a dozen more pieces that I have not been able to use. Plus, people actually sent me longer stories, like short stories, and in one case, a literal novella inspired by the oracles that were way too long for me to do anything with, but they just wanted to share them with me. And I think that is pretty amazing if you really think about it. Anyone who has rolled the dice, written something, and sent it in has been a huge part of making this show what it is. I wanted these pieces to set the tone and put you in the world before the adventure began, and these pieces written by you with such passion and imagination did that, and a whole lot more. To everyone who submitted, thank you, a million times thank you. Whilst I have your attention, why don't you leave a like, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with whatever I'm doing after this. Whilst this campaign is coming to a close, another has, shall we say, been sighted on the horizon. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon. There you'll get early access to all episodes, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and your name on screen like these lovely people. Last time out, we saw Professor Darwin on Cobalt Nux studying the series of black iron spires we now know to be the lens. As she ponders their inscrutable nature, the iron gate suspended in the lower atmosphere of the planet activates and something comes through. A ship. The gate is long abandoned, however, and is surrounded by the debris of an ancient asteroid which the ship, the eclipse cannot avoid, causing it to crash land atop one of Cobalt Nux's vast rocky plateaus. Archer is injured badly in the crash, and with the eclipse severely damaged, they have no choice but to continue the journey on foot. They have little to guide them beyond Griff's mysterious new protocols, so the survey bot leads the way. The first stages of the expedition pass without incident, but when they are forced to descend a sheer cliff face during a violent dust storm, they are left exposed to attack from a pair of monstrous creatures, part vulture, part bat. Luna is snatched by one of the beasts, but manages to scrap her way free, entangling it in the ropes they were using to descend the cliff before finishing it off with their rifle. Archer and the conduit hold the other bird off, but are dismayed to find the shadows not intervening despite the power they demonstrated on Narthex Prime. Luna arrives to help them drive off the great beast with a hail of gunfire before they pick up the trail again. As the storm worsens, they are confronted by what they believe to be another giant creature, but actually discover to be a large vehicle driven by Professor Darwin. She is briefly relieved to be reunited with Archer before she realizes he has company, namely the Shadows. So we're back at Professor Darwin's base camp. The vehicle that she picked him up, this buggy, this kind of big blocky thing with huge wheels that can kind of take on any and all terrain, is parked kind of outside. And we can see, like, a little detail is we see that it has a set of claw marks gouged into the top of it and the roof, like where some creature, probably one of those bat birds, got a little too close for comfort. The base camp is set up in an enclave, like a little niche in the rock face that protects it from the worst of the storms. Because we essentially established that the lens is located in this basin, right? This kind of vast basin. And this base camp is set up just off of that. The camp is 3 structures. There is this boxy prefab field lab. It's got like a simple metal frame and it holds these white walls in place. The largest of the 3 structures is what was probably at one point a mess hall. And we know that because there is a pair of like long tables, and each table has seats affixed to the underside. And it's big enough to seat about 15 to 20 people. But at the moment, this is where we find the Shadows. They're just sitting patiently, their expressions neutral. They're quietly eating these ration packs that Professor Darwin has distributed amongst them. Standing outside far less patiently is Luna, who is checking over her rifle for the 20th time in the last 15 minutes, whilst Griff shuts down to sleep mode for a well-needed rest. The conduit is warming her hands at a small fire that flickers on the ground. Both she and Luna are watching what is playing out in the 3rd structure, which is a simple shelter which has these leather tent-like flaps as walls. Inside, Archer and Professor Darwin are talking. And by the looks of it, Professor Darwin is processing a great deal of information. And she says, "So, that's that, is it?" And Archer is a little bit perplexed by that response and says, "Unless you have any better ideas?" And you can tell that Darwin hasn't really been listening to him. She seems distracted by something else. And she says, "I don't think we should be rash. We shouldn't rush into any decision we may regret, especially not as we're so close." And Archer says, "Have you listened to anything I've just said? You know what we need to do." And she turns away from him. She's standing at the entrance of the shelter, looking outward, deep in thought. Archer says, "We cannot take the risk. I need you to at least acknowledge that you have heard me. Vega is out there. He knows where you are. He knows what this place is and what the lens is capable of. We cannot risk him finding it. We cannot risk anyone finding it." The professor nods along, but she's not really listening. She kind of says, Of course. Archer moves over, winces as he does. His side is still hampering him significantly. He says, "I don't even know how, but we have to. Then we need to leave. Destroy the gate on the way out, I don't know. We need to make sure no one ever finds this place." And then something hits him, like it's a realization that's the kind of the manifestation of something that's been bugging him like in the back of his mind, and he'd not been able to form it into a thought with so much going on. But now he's kind of like shaped it into a question, or something resembling a question. Like when the professor got pulled through the gate all those years ago, it was just her, right? She stepped through there alone. Like, where did all this stuff come from? Like the buggy, the lab, the camp, like all this stuff. And he reaches out and he takes the flap of the tent in his hands and he turns it inward. And he sees that there's a logo on it. It's like a faded logo. And it's the logo, the crest of the Griffin Institute. But it's different. It kind of looks like a previous iteration from long before their time. Which begs the question, what is this place? And do you know what? I think now is the time to do something. And I've got a bit of an idea depending on how this goes. But I'm going to try to fulfill our vow. Now, not our vow about finding and destroying the lens. I mean our background vow. And as you can see, we don't even have 5 progress on it. That is very true. But I think that this could actually lead to some really interesting possibilities, because Archer has finally found the professor here, and this is not the reaction he wanted or expected. And I think that this role could see it play out in a couple of ways. So let's have a look at the move. Fulfill your vow says, when you reach the end of your quest, roll the challenge dice and compare it to your progress. Like I said before, we have 4 progress, which isn't what you'd call good in any real sense. It's not something I'd immediately recommend, especially not when the stakes are, I don't know, at the very highest they'll ever be. I mean, it's not outrageous that we might fluke a weak hit here. Statistically, we could roll a strong hit, but it seems unlikely. So let's do this. Let's roll to fulfill the background vow we have been chasing after for the best part of 3 years against only 4 progress. It's okay. I've got a good feeling about it. Don't worry. I'm shocked that we rolled a miss on that. And a straight miss actually makes it pretty interesting given how this has all been set up. So let's read the move. It says, on a miss, your vow is undone through an unexpected complication or realization. And I think it's a realization, right? It's the realization that the professor has absolutely no intention of destroying the gate or helping him destroy the gate. Now, I don't think she disbelieves him. I think that everything he said about Vega and Vega's intentions, she believes to be true. But I think personally, like, she's too close. Like, she has come too far to let this happen. Anyway, back to the move. It says, your vow is undone through an unexpected complication or realization. Yep. Envision what happens and then choose one. And the choices we have are give up on the quest, forsake your vow, or recommit to the quest. I'll tell you now, I'm absolutely not recommitting to this quest, so you can just go ahead and jot that down. So that leaves us with the other option, which is to forsake our vow, which is actually another move entirely. So let's take a look. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think I have ever rolled a hard miss on a fulfill your vow before. That's probably because I normally try not to attempt to fulfill it with only 4 progress. But, anyway, this is new territory. So let's take a look. Forsake your vow says, when you renounce your quest, betray your promise, or the goal is lost to you, clear the vow. So I think the goal is lost to us. We have discovered what has happened to Professor, broadly speaking. And in terms of unlocking the secret of the gates, which is the other part of our vow, we've sort of gone on our own journey with that. From Paxton Hold to the Precursor Vault in the Spine of Kronos to here, we have actually learned to navigate the network by ourselves. So the realization is kind of that our quest was actually folly, if you kind of really think about it. Then the move carries on and says, envision the impact of this failure and choose one or more as appropriate to the nature of the vow. And then any allies who shared this vow may also envision a cost. So we've got some options there. And out of them, there are a few that might work. Now, I don't think our reputation suffers, so we can ignore that one. And I don't want to do anything as pedestrian as endure stress or make a move like test a relationship. Now, the obvious one that jumps out informs what we already know, which is someone else takes advantage, envision how an enemy gains power. We know what's coming. And I think that narratively, what's happening is, like, since arriving here, we've lost an ally, like we've lost the professor's support. If you think about when we arrived, we thought it would just be a group of people agreeing to destroy the lens before Vega gets to use it. But now it feels like Archer, Luna, and the Conduit have to try and destroy the gate before one of two people uses it, one of which is the Professor, the other is Vega. Although their intentions may be very different, or are they? I don't know, we haven't really explored that yet. This is interesting. This is what I meant by like trying to fulfill this vow now. The other option there is the one of abandoning a path or resource, because that's also pretty interesting. Like, are we saying like the eclipse is done for? Because that's an asset we have. Does that give the rest of this story a different complexion, knowing that we have no way off this planet, no way except using the lens? I think I like that very much, and I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose the option to abandon a path or resource, and I am going to discard the eclipse. We have been through a lot, old girl, but it is the most interesting choice here, I think. So let's envision all this. The Professor still hasn't turned to face Archer, and she's still kind of looking out of the tent, and we can now see that she's watching the shadows, right? And she says, "Barlow, I'm afraid I can't let you go through with this." And Archer says, "Excuse me?" She says, "I have come too far to let an opportunity like this slip through my fingers." He says, "Did you not hear what I said? We have to destroy it." And she finally turns to him, fixes him dead in the eye and says, "Tell me, how do you propose we do that?" And Archer is about to start laying out his plan in detail, but his brain instantly stalls. He has been so set this whole time on the what, he has not considered the how. The only thing he knows of that could destroy black iron is the holy water that the Pact were mining, and he doesn't have a vatload of that in his back pocket, which is somewhat inconvenient. And the Professor continues, "We can't. You know it. We have to use it. It's the only way we're getting off this planet. The lens is a weapon, that is true, but it is also the nexus of the entire gate network. Not only can we use it to travel between worlds, to explore uncharted galaxies unimaginable distances away, we can use it to open up new realities, worlds between worlds, tear open the fabric of consciousness." And Archer is kind of taken aback by this, and she says, "I have been here studying this place, picking up the pieces of the Institute's failure." And she motions to that old logo on the side of the tent and says, "When I found out they'd been working on this for decades in one way or another, I had to see it for myself, but could only get so far. And then you drop from the sky with the final piece of the puzzle." And Archer immediately says, "I can't activate this thing." And Darwin laughs and says, "Oh, Barlow, you aren't the final piece of the puzzle." And she turns to look at the shadows and says, "You brought me exactly what I needed. Power." And Archer takes a second to remember where this all began. And I'm sure a couple of you will know what I'm talking about, because if you cast your mind back to the very first episode of this story, we had Archer trying to recover a databank from the ship known as the Creation. It was a ship carrying passengers with mystic abilities. It was a ship transporting them to be used to power a mythical superweapon. Well, that now seems kind of relevant. And Darwin concludes by saying, "The real voyage of discovery, Barlow, is not seeking new landscapes, but having new eyes." And she leaves the shelter and walks out a little further, her gaze fixed on a point in the distance. It is late dusk, and the night is closing in fast. Suddenly the shadows stop what they're doing and they join her. And Archer can feel it. He can feel a palpable energy in the air, a certain resonance, a familiar resonance. And it's one he's surprised to have not felt once since getting here. But now it is vibrating through every bone in his body. There is an earth-shattering boom as the dusky dark blue sky seems to be set ablaze. In the distance, something else has come through the gate. The Soulbinder's ship is altogether too big to be slowed down by the needles, but it was also too big to come through the gate. It smashes through, obliterating the only way off this planet in an instant. But this craft's journey here has left it a flaming ball of smoke and bilious fire. Most of its great mass has been stripped away by the forces of the gates. The domes have been ripped open, the spires snapped crooked. It is making planetfall like an asteroid belching a kilometre-long trail of flame behind it. It smashes into the plateau, sending a tsunami of rock and dust into the atmosphere. The impact is enough to shake everyone to the ground, and it is a matter of seconds before the plume of debris shrouds everything in total darkness. As it clears, Archer checks everyone is okay. Griff even came online and is now nervously scuttling around. Archer and Luna sprint from the base camp and out into the basin. They are closest to the structure that we know as the northwestern spire, the one we saw the professor looking at the start of the last episode. It's about 0.5 kilometre from base camp, so they can get to it in a minute or so. When they get there, Archer brings his scope up and looks up to the ridge of the plateau, which is backlit with this deep orange glow as the wreckage of the Soulbinder's craft burns out of sight on the plateau. There cannot have been any survivors, not in a crash of that magnitude. But he still looks. He is scouring the ridge for signs of life, and he very nearly thinks for a minute that it must have killed everyone on board, but deep down he knows the truth. And after a few minutes of scanning the ridge, he sees it filled with dozens of figures, silhouetted against the inferno. And he runs out further, past the spire, just a few hundred metres further, but even if it gives him a fraction of a better look, he'll take it. He brings the scope up once again and he can see the figures in more detail. Soulbinders. Their unmistakable appearance. Withered old forms in clear glass-domed helmets. All kinds of archaic life preservation machines keeping them moving. And standing in a long row before them, their shadows, still and subservient. He scans left and right looking for anyone else. And then he sees him. He zooms in to see hunched over and twisted, right arm folded up close to his chest, almost every inch of bare skin now punctured by ugly shards of black iron. Azrael Vega. And Vega is looking right down the lens of Archer's scope. Vega cocks his head and smiles, and Archer sees his eyes lighting up a pale pink as he begins to laugh. And that's when he sees the first Soulbinder drop to his knees. He zooms out a little and sees them falling one by one, the insides of their glass-domed helmets misting briefly red as Vega psychically pops their skulls like rotten grapes. He has no need for them anymore. They'll only slow him down. It's just Vega and the shadows. And after a moment, they fall in line and work their way down a series of switchbacks that will eventually lead to the basin floor and to the spires of the lens. So this is going to be a fight, right? But more an objective-based one, given that with the distances I have established, somewhat inconveniently for my needs, Our combatants are several kilometres apart. So this is going to be an interesting application of the rules here. But yeah, let's do it. Anyway, we begin any kind of fight, as always, with the move Enter the Fray, which says, when you initiate combat or are forced into a fight, envision your objective and give it a rank. Now, the name of the objective is going to be Stop Azrael Vega taking control of the gate. And rank-wise, this is a big deal. This is the culmination of everything we've been working towards all this time. That said, we're in the final episode. We don't want this to go on for 10 years. There are two of us contributing towards the track. I don't think we've had a joint combat before in this, so it should technically fill twice as quickly. So I'm going to make this formidable. So what are we doing? Archer, I think, is going to try and work out how the hell he's going to do this. Try and gather as much information as possible. Try and figure out what it's going to take to activate the lens and to stop Vega getting the upper hand. So I think he's sizing up the situation and will be rolling with wits. Now, Luna, on the other hand, she's definitely not hanging around. And I think that she's actually already screamed something at Archer about running interference, and she and the conduit have already piled into the buggy. So she's going to be facing off against your foe, so that'll be plus heart. So I'll roll for them each separately. Luna is on the move. She has the conduit at the wheel of the buggy, and the pedals to the metal. Luna is readying her rifle, and she's going to try and pin them back. She's going to try and slow them down. As she's already in motion, we'll do her first. So Luna is running interference with the conduit in the buggy, charging into action. So we will enter the fray, rolling plus heart. That's a weak hit. So on a strong hit, we can take both. On a weak hit, we choose one. Choice is momentum or control, and I think we'll take the control here because we are rushing right into the midst of things. We could well be sitting ducks if we don't. So that's Luna. Archer, on the other hand, he's going to try and think his way out of this one. He's frantically looking at the spires, the configuration of the lens, trying to crunch everything he has learned into something like a plan. So we're going to enter the fray with Archer rolling plus wits. Strong hit, excellent. So we get to choose both. So we are in control and we get +2 momentum. So that takes us up to 9, which will come in very useful, I'm sure. Archer gets straight on the comms to Luna as he's craning his neck to look up at this mighty spire and says, "Nice of you to stick around to hear the plan." And she brings him up on it in her earpiece and says, "I'm not big on details." Archer says, "Draw him off, stall him. Whatever you can do, just buy me some time. Don't get too close. You know what he can do. Let's not give him the chance." And she says, "Don't worry. I've got this." And Archer says, "I was worried you would say that." And the conduit has closed the gap quite quickly. Luna can see the column of shadows moving down the switchbacks. She slides the door open and tries to aim the best she can and says, "Hold it steady." The conduit says, "Don't worry about me. Just take the shot when you have it." And the buggy coughs up a great plume of dust as it powers towards the switchbacks. Luna does not want to get close. She wants to hit and run. She wants to squeeze off a few bursts before he can take control of her. And she remembers how powerless she felt when he was inside her mind on Sepulchre. She feels sick to her stomach at the memory of it. She shakes it off. She takes aim and fires. And this is going to be a move, and that move is Strike, which says when you are in control and assault a foe, at close quarters, roll plus iron. If you attack at a distance, roll plus edge. We are going to leverage our asset, our gunner asset, and the first ability, which reads, when you strike, choose one before rolling. We can either pin them down, which gives us a +1 to the roll and +1 momentum on a hit, or we can make them hurt, which is mark progress on a hit. And I think we're going for maximum impact here. So we are going to choose the make them hurt option, which will give us an extra progress if we land a hit. And that could be any hit, weak hit or strong hit. So let's strike, rolling plus edge. A weak hit. So on a weak hit, mark progress twice, but you expose yourself to danger. You are in a bad spot. So we mark progress twice, that's 2, and then we get +1 from the gunner assets. It takes us up to 3. So let's envision it. Luna unloads, fires a series of short bursts in Vega's direction. It's not hard to pick him out of the crowd, and even though it's at long range, from a moving position, Luna is a good shot. And not wanting to get too close or risk it, like, the conduit just keeps driving. She speeds past as Luna stops firing and skids into a slide. But it drags them way out of position, way out of range. And Luna is desperately hanging onto the door frame. And up on the switchbacks, Vega steps over the bodies of several shadows who either threw themselves in the way or were pulled into the line of fire. Either way, they're dead and he is not. And Archer comes over the comms and says, "What happened?" Luna is still clinging on as the conduit struggles to get the buggy under control. She says, "Still trying to figure that out." And Archer says, "No blowback?" And Luna says, "Nothing yet. Coming around for another run once someone learns to drive." And Archer shuts off the comms. Something just isn't sitting right with him. Like, why didn't Vega strike first? Why didn't he or the others retaliate immediately? And why didn't the shadows help when they were being attacked by the birds? And then it clicks. Black iron is a conduit for this mystical energy, right? We've established that. But not here. Here, black iron is an inhibitor, especially like when you're around the lens. And this feeds into an idea that I had all the way back in season 1 when I first mentioned mystics having black iron in their skin. Like, they had that done to them deliberately so they could connect with the lens. But away from this incredibly powerful object, it acts not as an inhibitor, but as a lightning rod, and it allows them to project power through it. But to activate the lens, they need to physically connect with the spires. And as Archer's processing this, he reaches his hand out and puts it out to touch the spire, kind of slowly inching closer to its surface, expecting reaction. And he is shocked to feel a tug at his wrist. He turns round to see a shadow, a girl, mid-teens, pale-skinned, black iron below her eyes and along the bones of her hands. She shakes her head gently no and approaches the spire. She extends her hand, and as it nears the surface of this titanic structure, a handprint appears in its surface. Archer thinks his eyes are playing tricks on him, but it's definitely there. She slips her hand into the indentation, which perfectly fits hers. The ground shakes. The floor of the basin starts to crack apart. The shadow's eyes roll back into her head and her mouth falls open. Archer is knocked to the ground by the sheer power of the energy coursing through the spire. And crackling pinkish yellow light runs into the recesses of this thing, illuminating the intricate precursor detail whilst fizzing with incredible psychic potential. The shadow's open mouth fills with wisps of pink light and her eyes come back to her, although now they are glowing a brilliant white. This feels to Archer to be incredibly unsafe, incredibly unstable. And as he gets to his feet, he is met by the professor, who is gazing up at the brilliantly illuminated spire. And he can see her mouthing, "It's beautiful." And her eyes begin to glow too. And that's when Archer immediately thinks of a different plan. And this is going to be a move. And that move is going to be gain ground, which says when you are in control and take action in a fight to reinforce your position or move towards an objective, envision your approach and roll. And this is going to be us coordinating a plan, studying a situation or cleverly gaining leverage. So rolling plus wits. Okay, it's a weak hit, so I only get to choose one of the options. And I think I've got to take the progress here. And I think that represents the fact that we have a bit of an advantage, and I'll get to why that is and what Archer's plan is in a second. So let's mark progress. So we're up to 4 out of 10. Archer jumps straight on comms and says, "Luna, get back here." And the conduit is just bringing the buggy round for another run. And Luna says, "What? I've got a clear shot." And Archer says, "We need to get the shadows to the spires. We need the wheels. They are too far apart." And Luna says, "I've got a clear shot." And Archer says, "Luna, get back here now." And Luna cuts off the comms and she gets her rifle ready and takes up a firing position again. And the conduit says, "What are you doing?" And Luna says, "Just Hold it steady. And Luna, against Archer's orders, lines up her shot. This time at a shadow that she has tracked from the base of the cliff that has just made it to the base of the spire nearest them. She can see him reaching out a hand, and as he does, Luna squeezes the trigger. And the ground shakes. The earth beneath the buggy cracks, sending it bouncing into the air. And the second of the 8 spires of the lens becomes a beacon, a brilliant column of light. This one, however, seems way less stable. Arcs of crackling energy spider out in all directions, and as Luna looks up in awe at the sheer insane spectacle of it all, she sees one of those arcs heading their way. And this is going to be a move. And that move is react under fire. It says when you are in a bad spot and take action in a fight to avoid danger or overcome an obstacle, envision your approach and roll. This is definitely dodging or taking cover because as the conduit is concentrating on getting the buggy headed back to where Archer said to go, she's actually not seeing what Luna is seeing. So Luna has little choice but to reach back and yank on the steering wheel. So let's react under fire, rolling plus edge. A weak hit. On a weak hit, you avoid the worst of the danger or overcome the obstacle, but not without a cost. Make a suffer move. You stay in a bad spot. So the buggy lurches out of the way of this bolt of energy that slams into where they just were, sending huge hunks of rock into the air and lifting the back wheels of the buggy off the ground, which comes back down with a crunch and skids to a halt. And the gears grind because the front left wheel is jammed in one of the cracks that the impact opened. Luna avoided being fried by that bolt, but now they are not moving. They are stuck. They are exposed and completely helpless. And Archer sees this all unfolding, and he turns to see that the other shadows have gathered alongside the professor. Now, the shadow that is connected to the spire turns her head slowly and makes eye contact with Archer. And instantaneously, he feels connected. He feels in tune. He feels open to the power of the lens. And he sort of slips out of himself briefly and is imagining what is happening on the other side of the lens at the other spire. He can see, like in his mind's eye or whatever, Vega's shadows fanning out, moving quickly towards the other points on the circle. And before Archer has any real conception of what has happened or how, he is envisioning a bolt of pure energy honing in on them. And he snaps out of this almost trance-like state. He kind of catches himself, horrified at the thought that that incredible power could be at his disposal. But then he is even more horrified to see that the very thing that he imagined is manifesting. He envisioned it, and it has become real because a concentrated, ragged burst of pure, deadly, devastating power is heading their way. And this is going to be a move. And that move is Strike, which says when you are in control and assault a foe at close quarters, roll plus iron. When you attack at a distance, roll plus edge. This is going to be rolling plus edge because we are technically attacking a foe at a distance. And that's a weak hit. It says on a weak hit you mark progress twice, but you expose yourself to danger. You are in a bad spot. Should I burn momentum on this? Like, we are at 9, I think. It would keep us in control. We are going to mark progress twice, no matter what, so we'll do that now. We're up to 6 out of 10, which is pretty decent. But I think a really interesting gameplay position here because Archer does not want to do this move, has done a move, and is now burning momentum to not face the consequences of this move. And I think I'm going to do it. I am going to burn that momentum because I think with Archer and Luna both in a bad spot, this would be so much harder to pull out of. So yes, I will burn the momentum back down to 2 and make that a strong hit. So Archer is helpless to see this unfold. The air fizzes with energy and there is a snap and a crack. And the ground around the shadows on the other side of the lens erupts in a flash of pink light, sending them cartwheeling into the air, bodies broken, each of them fizzing with crackling static, killed instantly. Archer is shaking. Like, he couldn't stop that from happening. He thought it, and it happened. And just like that, they were dead. That is the power and the potential of this weapon. And a weapon that is currently operating at a fraction of its full capability. And Archer knows then and there that if Vega was to harness this power, it would be the end of them all. Archer needs to destroy this thing, and to do so, he needs to get the other spires up and running. But to do that, he needs the buggy. His plan, such as it is to take control of more spires than Vega. It's that simple. Then he's going to try and overload this cursed thing with its own power in the hope that it will create like an infinite feedback loop and in some way collapse under the sheer weight of it all. That's his plan. Archer pulls up his scope to see what's happening for himself. He checks in on the buggy and he can see it stuck. He can see the wheels spinning as it tries to power out of this crack that it's stuck in. In the distance, he can see the shadows on the other side continue to move around towards the other spires. If they do not get that buggy up and running, Vega will have half the lens working in short order and they will be helpless to stop him taking total control over it. Out in the center of the circle, something new is happening where the cracks have been appearing with each discharge of energy as each spire kind of comes online, as it were. There are now rays of light beginning to seep through the ground as if something is trying to break free from below. Now, Archer is in no hurry to find out what that is because he can see something even more concerning. Through his scopes, he can see Azrael Vega moving with purpose, or as much purpose as his twisted form will allow, moving to the center of the lens. Worryingly, he's moving towards where the light is coming from, through the cracks in the earth. And Archer gets on the comms and says, "Luna, get out of there, we need the buggy." And she says, "Working on it." We see her rummaging around in the back of the buggy trying to find something, anything. She pulls out a shovel, this small field shovel, and slips out of the door and squeezes herself under the buggy and wedges the blade underneath the trapped wheel and kind of kicks it in further, deeper into the ground with the sole of her boot. She gives the conduit a thumbs up and the conduit floors it. And this is going to be a move. The move is React Under Fire, which says when you are in a bad spot and take action in a fight to avoid danger or overcome an obstacle, envision your approach and roll. Now, this is definitely cleverly bypassing an obstacle, so it will not be leaning into Luna's strong suit. So let's React Under Fire, rolling plus wits. It's a miss. On a miss, the situation worsens. You stay in a bad spot and must pay the price. And I think we're very lucky that was a low roll, because I think a momentum burn is definitely required here to turn this miss into a strong hit. So we bumped down from 7 to 2. It says on a strong hit, you succeed and are in control, take +1 momentum. So that goes back up to 3 instantly. So the wheel continues to spin. But as Luna gives the handle of the shovel another kick, driving it deeper into the ground, the wheel finally finds something to grip onto and bites and lurches out of the crack. And Luna's forced to roll out of the way just in time. And as she starts to catch up to the buggy, she looks back and sees Vega approaching in the distance. And then she looks back in the other direction and sees Archer, himself struggling with the injury he picked up in the crash, making his way towards the middle. These two are going to meet in the center of the lens. She hesitates and then runs to the buggy and leans in the window and says to the conduit, "Get the shadows to the spires." And the conduit says, "What are you going to do?" And she says, "Still figuring that out." And without a moment's hesitation, the conduit puts her foot down and speeds away. Luna takes one look at Vega, one look at Archer, and then decides to run in the opposite direction, running towards the second active spire. Archer watches her go, and he just has to sort of trust that she's going to try and buy him some time. He can see Vega moving towards the center of the lens, and he figures he has a chance at Vega here, like directly to attack him before more spires come online. If Archer's theory is correct, that they can't use their power independent of the spires, then he has a chance to take him out, right? He's just a man of flesh and bone. If he can get the draw on him, he can put him down with just his pistol. But there's this nagging doubt in the back of Archer's mind that if Vega really was powerless, why is he walking unarmed straight into danger? The conduit and the buggy swing around, collect the shadows and head off towards the other spires. Meanwhile, Archer picks up the pace the best he can. They are only a few hundred meters apart now, but due to his injury, he's not much faster than the shuffling, hunched form of Vega. Every step is an effort. Whatever energy is seeping through the ground, it feels like it's getting stronger. Feels like it's making progress harder. Feels like it's making his legs feel heavier. Almost as if he is moving in low gravity. He eventually gets just within pistol range. The air all around him begins to hum ominously. He's struggling to even level his pistol and aim. The effort of every step feels huge, and just squeezing the trigger takes everything he has. He can feel his entire body constrict, as if he is under intense amounts of pressure. He tries to keep his pistol hand steady, but it's incredibly difficult. With a bad aim and blurred vision, he opens fire and hopes he will hit the mark. And this is going to be a move. And that move is strike, which says when you're in control and assault a foe at close quarters, roll plus iron. You attack at distance, roll plus edge. So we are going to strike, rolling plus edge. That is a miss. On a miss, the fight turns against you. You are in a bad spot and must pay the price. We have no momentum, so we are going to have to eat this. And I'm going to say that Archer fires once, fires twice, fires 3 times, and each shot sails harmlessly wide of Vega. And with all the effort he has, Archer's next shot finally finds its mark. And as it hits Vega square in the chest, there is a blinding flash of light, and a powerful wave of kinetic energy knocks Archer flying backwards. There are now not 1, not 2, but 3 spires fired up on Vega's side of the lens, and the energy that is unspooling from them is now pouring directly into Azrael Vega, who stands hands by his side, head tilting skyward, the black iron in his skin glowing white hot. Archer is forced to shield his eyes as beams of brilliant white escape from Vega's eyes and mouth. And then there is a grinding, churning coming up from below the ground, and Archer is suddenly lifted up by something crunching through the earth. In the center of a lens, a new structure emerges from the ground. A stepped, circular, crystalline structure, pure white, slowly shuddering into place. Vega is now standing atop this structure, about 10 meters off the ground. He is standing atop a giant crystalline prism. He is now the pinnacle. He is now the focus point. He is now the nexus for all this energy. Archer tumbles backwards down the step structure, landing awkwardly at the bottom. And that'll be the price we pay in a hit to our health. So we'll take him down to 1 health. Okay. As Archer puts a hand out to steady himself and get back to his feet, the palm of his hand touches the crystalline structure, and he suddenly sees in horrifying detail what the stakes are. He sees visions of scorched earth, cities and settlements razed to the ground, centuries of suffering, decimated ecosystems, splintered planets, collapsing stars, all at the hands of Azrael Vega. The scope of whatever destructive ambition he had has now careened wildly out of control. All there is now is total, universal annihilation. Luna is running full tilt. She is desperately trying to keep her feet as the earth shifts beneath her, throwing her this way and that. She is very nearly in range of the shadows closing in on their 4th and 5th spires. She looks back across to their side of the lens and sees the conduit dropping off the first shadow, getting ready and igniting a spire across the other side. So now we have control of 2 spires to Vega's 3. The air feels like it is about to boil. There is that much latent energy in the atmosphere. She watches as the buggy closes in on the next spire. Archer gets to his feet. He is battered. He is broken. He is barely able to keep his balance. The energy flowing through Vega and the spires is wild and untamed, unrestrained. Arcs of yellow and blue and pink static connect him to every single spire. Archer has to do something. It is now or never. Luna gets barely close enough to shoot, but Vega's shadows are almost there. And if she doesn't do it now, Archer will have no chance. This is going to be a move, and we are going to make a move that we have not made before. That move is Aid Your Ally. Aid Your Ally says, when you act in direct support of an ally, envision how you aid them, then secure an advantage or gain ground to take action. Now, the reason we're going to do this is because Archer's not in control. We need to get him back in control so he can do something, and we're going to do that by making the move gain ground and pass that benefit on to Archer. All we need is a hit to put Archer back in control so he can act in the situation, because currently he's in a bad spot and he's going to really, really struggle. If we get more than a weak hit, then that will really help him out. So let's look at gain ground, which says when you're in control and take action in a fight to reinforce your position or move towards an objective, envision your approach and roll. We are totally charging boldly into action here. So we are going to aid our ally by making the gain ground move, rolling plus heart. Strong hit. That is huge. As per the Aid Your Ally move, Archer is back in control. He also gets the benefit from the gain ground move, and the benefits of the gain ground move are we get to choose 2 of the 3 options. We're definitely going to mark progress, so we're up to 7 out of 10, and we will also take the momentum 2, which always comes in handy. So let's envision what Luna did. Even though Vega's shadows are barely in range, she takes her shot. And she finds her target. She cuts down the shadows in a hail of gunfire before they can reach the spires. She looks back across the circle. We are now at 3 spires each. It is now or never. Luna skids to a halt and turns back towards the centre of the lens and breaks into a flat sprint. Archer unsteadily tries to clamber up the prism, but finds himself having to duck under powerful beams that cut through the air, emanating from Vega, who is now shuddering as light begins to dance and whirl around the entire basin. A powerful hum is growing in intensity, almost as if the lens is charging up. Luna is close now, spurred on by adrenaline. She has covered some serious ground at incredible pace. She can see Vega. She fires from the hip as she runs, trying to hit him, but she's going too fast to get close. Archer pulls himself up the prism. He is only 1 level away from being able to reach Vega. Luna is screaming at Archer. She swings her rifle over her shoulder and begins to climb the prism herself. Archer clambers up to face down Vega on the top step. He is about 10 meters away, but he can barely stay upright. The hum is now a roar, and the prism begins to slowly grind and spin. Shafts of light spreading out from Vega's feet splinter the crystal. Vega has now totally lost control. He is not wielding the lens's power. He is not channeling its energy. He is the lens now. And Archer has nothing. What is he supposed to do? He is injured. He is exhausted. He has nothing to fight back with. Nothing except the black iron compass around his neck. He pulls it loose and clutches it tight in his palm. Luna is almost at the top of the prism, but a shaft of energy bursts through a crack and drives her back. Archer turns and sees her, once again coming to his rescue. He knew she'd make it. He gives her a look, a furrowed brow, resigned to a fate forged in iron, and he begins to run straight at Vega. Luna pulls herself up, screaming to Archer. She brings her rifle up, but she'll only hit him if she fires. He is a few steps away now, and he throws himself towards Vega with everything he has left. As his feet leave the floor, the fourth spire activates. In an instant, the immense power of this Iron Gate Nexus, this ancient mythical superweapon, is focused intensely in one place. A place where Archer's mind directed it. The black iron compass held in his hand, glowing with world-destroying energy. He swings his fist towards Vega, and the punch lands. Let's take decisive action. When you seize an objective in a fight, envision how you take decisive action, then roll the challenge dice and compare your progress. That is a weak hit. On a weak hit, you achieve your objective, but not without cost. As the punch lands, the world goes silent. Everything goes white. Luna feels herself falling. Time expands. The only thing she can feel is pain. Her right arm that she put up to instinctively protect herself burns with an intensity the likes of which is beyond anything Luna has ever felt. And after that, nothing. So let's fulfill our vow. When you reach the end of your quest, roll the challenge dice and compare to your progress. Now, ending that fight with Vega puts us up to 9 progress. So let's roll. A strong hit. On a strong hit, your vow is fulfilled. We see the great spires, one by one, buckling and bending under the stress of the overload. The blast has blackened and scarred the cliff faces of the basin in all directions. The shadows who found themselves used as pawns in this cruel, eons-old game have finally been released from their torment. The prism at the centre of the lens has been shattered into dust. Vega and Archer are gone. As the dust settles, the conduit steers the buggy slowly through the carnage at morning's first light. Unable to make it all the way to the epicenter of the blast, she gets out and starts searching on foot. She finds the body of Professor Darwin, crushed amidst the wreckage of a collapsed spire. Close by, she finds Griff, his orange chassis shredded with shrapnel from the blast. And further in, she finds Luna, twisted in a heap, thrown like a rag doll by the force of the explosion. Her right arm is a battered, bloody mess, her clothes singed, her hair burnt. But she's still breathing. The conduit hauls Luna to her feet, and they head back towards the buggy. As a storm picks up and rolls in over the plateau, the debris and detritus of the lens will soon be reclaimed by the dust, and the scars on the landscape are all that will remain. The waves churn violently in the ocean down below the rig. Eventide Terminal was remote, and that was just the way the conduit liked it. No settlement for hundreds of kilometres in any direction, and no prying eyes suited her just fine. It had its comforts, namely the bar in which she was enjoying a nightcap whilst checking over tomorrow's manifest. It was a quiet night, not many in, although it did receive its fair share of visitors usually. Mostly spacers just passing through who didn't want records kept or questions asked. But tonight, the choppy seas and squalls rolling in on the radar had made anyone thinking of taking a chance think better of it. She thanks the barkeep for the drink and heads out to the landing platform. There is usually room for half a dozen small craft, but tonight there was only one. She shrugs a heavy coat over her shoulders and heads out into the rain. The Balefire was a heavily modified courier-class vessel, with the bulk of those modifications being armaments usually not required for the transportation of cargo. But it was a vessel befitting of its new owner, Luna Zhang, who was making her final checks before the Balefire made its maiden voyage. She and the conduit take shelter under the wing. Luna draws back the hood of her woolen grey poncho to reveal her hair cut short, but still with the ever-present green and blue streak in the fringe, now joined by a third streak of brilliant white. She seems nervous, quietly anxious. She says, "Thanks. You know, for everything." And the conduit senses Luna's apprehension, senses that fear of the unknown. She moves towards her and softly, reassuringly touches her cheek. She smiles warmly and says, "You're like me, kid. You're a survivor. You'll be just fine." And the two women embrace before the conduit leaves Luna on the platform and heads inside, knowing better than to look back one last time. On board, Luna takes her seat, a seat set back away from the controls in the cockpit. She looks down at her right arm. It's been months, but it still hasn't healed. A series of equally perplexed riggers told her she was just going to have to learn to live with the fragments of what only she knew was ancient black iron embedded in her wrist, the backs of her hands, and along her knuckles. Today the tremors had been tough to quieten, but she tried to convince herself it was mostly nerves, although deep down she knew that wasn't true. At the front of the cockpit, where the pilot would normally sit, was a custom console, bulky and incongruous to the otherwise sleek design of the controls. At the centre was an orange box with a single circular eye. It had been an engineering challenge to take the wreckage of a malfunctioning survey bot and convert it to operate as the Balefire's AI, but Luna had done it, and done it well. From his new home, Griff prepared them for departure. The ship rising up and off the platform. A brilliant lemon-coloured full moon framed in the viewport as rain streaks the glass. Luna closes her eyes for a moment, takes a deep breath, holds it. Yeah, I miss him too. The E-drive kicks, the view turns purple and gold, and they jump into the drift.